Okay, I'm just working on my crankshaft now. I'm just checking the new crankshaft to see how, if it needs to be tweaked at all, trued I should say. So you check within, I think, a ½ inch of the PTO shaft snub. I had about 5 thou end plate. I've just got it sitting in the bottom cases. It's not super stable, so I got to be careful how I do this, but you can see it's got just over 2 thou right now. I trued it by clamping see, there's the high spot. Actually, that's the low spot, I think, there. It's low there. Comes up a bit. Anyway, it was about 4 thou, between 4 and 5 thou of runout. I just used a set of these vice grip pinchers. You've probably seen these on different videos where guys true crankshafts. And I was able to pinch the webs here, or the flywheels here, and get it down to about just over 2 thou. Skidoo's tolerance here is 2.3 thou. I think I'm very close to that, and I've heard of guys being like 6 thou out and the engine still ran, but that's when they rebuilt it. So I'd like to get that down to about 1 thou. I might pinch it one more time, but this close to spec is okay with me. This was a etec rebuilt crankshaft. I've heard good. I've read some older posts. I thought maybe it was just in the past that they were a little more sloppy, that said they've had guys have seen them 5 to 10 thou run out. Then the more recent posts, it seems like they've been doing a little bit more precise job of truing their crankshafts before they send them out. More recent posts say that CVTech crankshafts have been closer, like to 1-2 thou run out. This one obviously was out of spec right from being rebuilt, right from the shop. I'm not impressed with that, but I was expecting it because of the posts that I've read about these guys and the reviews that I've read about them. However, the supplier, that's pretty much our Canadian supplier. I think Mongoose Machine could do it. They're probably a little more expensive, but this is what my supplier got me. It wasn't a bad price, so you get what you pay for, I guess, in this case. This crank, it looks like it was, it's not real rough as far as the assembly went and everything. I don't see a bunch of marks on anything, so that part, they did a fairly nice job. And I don't know, like when I put this into when I put the top case on and bolt it down, there's going to be some pinch and things might change a little bit too. So I'm going to try and get it as close as I can, then I'll check it when I get the case bolted back together again. There's a couple other things that I did while I had it apart that I'll show you, but I've got to take the crankshaft back out to do that. Everything, all my surfaces are cleaned and stuff. I want to just get at least the bottom end put together today. Like I say, I'm running behind schedule, so get that done. Some guys have done some work on the water pump. I can show you that. I don't want to take the impeller off because I was reading and guys say that usually you don't want to put the impeller back on after you've heated it up to get it off the shaft. It's these stupid plastic impellers, and I doubt the parts company that the dealership locally has the impeller in stock or a mechanical seal. I'm not going to wait for parts. There's nothing wrong with this one. It wasn't leaking any coolant, so I'm not going to take the water pump apart. But what I saw some guys do is, you can see a coolant passage above the water pump there. That goes up into here and then up into your block, and he drilled that out just a little bit bigger. There's a lot of casting, like some rough casting around there. You can kind of see through there now, and you can see the water pump drive gear. That's the hole that he drilled out. He said a 5.5 millimeter drill bit to do that. I was going to do that, but I'm not going to take the water pump apart. If I had the parts, I probably would, but I don't, and I'm not waiting for parts. I just removed a bit of casting down there, and down there you'll see it's quite a high ridge if you take these engines apart. I don't know if I'm going to gain much. That's a big hole for coolant circulation, but I thought I'd do it while I had it apart. The other thing that I did was I drilled out the top of the case. You'll see these coolant passages too have casting flash in them. So I just took I don't know what size of drill bit, is about 5 millimeter drill bit, and I just drilled those two, just the flashing out. So I get a little bit better flow through there. I think every little bit helps, and you probably know how these T3s heat up on the trail. I've mentioned that a couple times. That's where I'm at. This crankshaft, this bearing, the inner PTO bearing has been packed with Isoflex. The mag side bearings have been. Looks like I'm going to need to put a little bit more in there. And I think these center bearings have too, because there's quite a lot of rolling resistance. I don't see, oil's going to get in here. You've got an oiler there. There's no seal here. Oil's going to get into the crankshaft. and lube these bearings, but I've read on the forums you guys pack them anyways, so glad that they did that before they sent it to me. Okay, I was wrong. I thought there was a half lock ring on these inside bearings that locked into the case here, but as you can see there isn't. There's no lock ring on the old bearings that were in there. There's just the locating dowel. So all we have to do is make sure that that's lined up. Just the one on the outside has these two lock rings here. So that's good. Don't have to worry about that. So just an update. I misunderstood there. I guess I didn't remember taking it on disassembly. Good thing I took videos of all this. Okay, I'm going to put the case halves back together again. Just make sure everything's lined up when you do this. Line up your dowels. You'll see marks on the case here, and then there's also little pockets on the top case for them to go in. All the dowels are going to face the front of the engine, or the front where the front of the sled would be, but you'll see little marks from when you on disassembly where they were. And your seals, make sure your seals are in the grooves. Make sure your locking rings on this side are in the grooves. There's one between the bearings, there's one on the outside bearing there. If you're taking it apart, or pardon me, putting it back together, make sure your isoflex is in these. This was pre-greased. Make sure that your mag side seal is in the groove. And then this is just sealed by gasket glue, so I'm using Permatex Ultra Black. Put a little, you don't need a ton, just make sure you get around the water pump groove there. There's a little groove to hold the sealant. Just make sure you get a nice even coat. It doesn't have to be real thick. And then slap them back together again. I've got the case halves together. The engine's upside down right now. Bed plate goes on. I'm calling this like a girdle on the bottom. These bolts have an 11mm head. They're the long, large diameter bolts, so they're listed as. These get torqued to 21 foot-pounds, and I'll be doing a cross pattern like this. Okay. All the way to both ends of the case. So you got two small diameter ones, these are 21 foot-pounds. You got these hex ones, all these smaller ones, there's 4 here that are socket screw. And then you've got 4 more here that are like an 8mm head, I believe. Yeah, those are 8mm. Or the torques. And these ones are all 97 inch-pounds. I'm going to torque the big ones first because they're on the inside, then I'm going to torque these small ones after, and I'll just do the same pattern, crisscross, center, out. That's fine. That's the way I don't know what the BRP specific torque pattern is, but I've used that on cylinder heads and everything, and that's just the standard way of doing a torque pattern. Alright, so I'm going to get that done. Start with the large ones at 21 foot-pounds. Something else that I noticed is that, it seems like a lot. Oh my goodness. Okay, so something else that I noticed is this case will stay apart just ever so slightly. I wanted to try to get it tight, like I thought they'd fit together tightly, but they didn't. And the last thing you want to do is pull it together with bolts, but I mean, like I'm talking just a little bit, like a 32nd of an inch, not even. So the dowels and stuff are a little tight, so you may have to just pull that last tiny little bit. If you got like an 1/8 of an inch gap or something, don't force it, of course. Okay, so these all torqued up. Everything was clean, the bolt holes were clean, I didn't have to chase them. Really, there wasn't a bunch of residue in them, I just blew them out. Brake clean, and just snugged them up by hand before I was torquing them. This torque wrench is set to 97 inch-pounds. There. Okay, and while I got this set up, I'm just going to check these ones to make sure. Okay, that's good. Alright, now I'm going to pre-lube the water pump cavity. Just be careful when you're moving it around that you don't hit the connecting rods really hard or anything like that. I already had this off and put my new gasket on. Worried about that. So the gasket's not going to be stuck or anything. Okay, so you can get at it. This is interesting. This part of the water pump drive, you can see that there's like a fuel and like the old oil injection pump drive. Looks like you could actually bolt an oil pump on here. I thought that was neat because if you were running a turbo, run a ball bearing turbo, you could run an old injection pump on here to lubricate your turbo possibly, maybe, I don't know, it's an idea. I'm going to use this syringe and some 2-stroke oil. The guys are saying 50 milliliters in here. Some guys say 50, some guys say 55. I'll put 55 in, it's not going to hurt anything. It's a sealed cavity. It does have an oil injector. I think this is probably the quickest way to do it. I'm seeing the guys on the forums doing it this way. Watch out though. Okay, that's 35. Plus a little bit in the tube. So just slowly pump it in there. Could probably measure it out in a cup and pour it in with just with a small funnel. If you're just be careful and go slow and don't overflow it. It's kind of like watching paint dry. Too much there. Okay, that was 35. I'm going to add another 20. Good enough. That should do. Just for some pre-lube in there before we put it back together again. Check the run out. It's about the same as when when I had it apart. So just over 2 thou. Just gonna do BRP specs. It might be just a little bit over, but I've also got to account for the case. Is it's hard to hold it steady and turn the crankshaft without it kind of rocking or moving on here. I shimmed it up the best I could underneath the case and got it sitting steady. I didn't hold it down with anything. So I think that a little bit of that is actually just movement in of the block moving around a little bit while I'm checking. And it's pretty close, like it's pretty much in spec, so I'm not worried about that. Here is greasing the outside seal. Push it in there as far as I can. Pardon me, the outside bearing. Now this I'm not overly concerned about, because you're going to have to re-grease this while it's in the chassis. It's the PTO side. It's very easy to do. You've probably seen the videos. Once as long as you don't have to fight with the clutch for hours to get it off. So I'm not too worried about this if I don't push the grease right into the. Get as much in there as you can, but if I got to take it apart and check it in a couple thousand kilometers, so I got to re-grease it anyway. It's only like a 20-minute job to do. It's not the end of the world. Anyway, so there we go. Because I had some of this left over from when I took it apart to re-grease it, but the crankshaft did come with a little package of it for this side, which was nice of them to include with the rebuilt crank. Little bottle here. Isoflex, keep that for the next time. This stuff is outrageously expensive and a complete rip-off, I think. I was thinking about using just super lube on these bearings, but you don't have to do it very often. So the guys that say to spend the money on Isoflex do have a point. Sure it's expensive, but if it's only a couple times that you got to do this while you own the sled, so be it. Might be worth the money. I honestly don't think it's as good as what they charge for it. So I've got the I just replaced this crank bearing and never even ran the engine just long enough to get it in the shop after I re-greased the old crank. So I'm just going to reuse that seal, and then I've got another seal for if I still own this sled and I've got to do this again, which I'll probably do like end of next winter. I'll re-grease it with Isoflex just for pre-winter maintenance. I can't remember the exact amount they want you to put in between the, I think it's like a 50-gram tube like this, in between the bearing and the seal, but they say to fill the seal up too, and I see the guys online on the forums doing that, and the other YouTube videos just putting in there. Now I do like this idea. They say that you need a little bit of room in there for expansion contraction of the bearing. That's pardon me, of the bearing of the grease to flow, because the grease it'll turn to liquid, and then of course when your sled's parked and it gets cold, like -20, it's going to turn back into a solid. So you do want a little bit of air in there. The thing that I don't like about that is it's going to draw moisture into the bearing if you've got an air pocket in there. I guess that it is what it is. We've got to do this as preventative maintenance and make sure that we take the seal off once in a while, you know, at the recommended interval or sooner, and make sure that that moisture isn't getting in there. So that's not too much to ask. So the seal just kind of sits in that groove. Push it in so it stays there. Make sure you put some grease on the inside surface of the seal. I noticed that other guys, even if they use a different type of grease, like I mentioned, Super Lube is one that I saw some guys saying they had good success with instead of using the expensive Isoflex. If they do, they always say they still use the Isoflex to lube the seal lip. So that's something to keep in mind. Don't ask me why they do that. Maybe it's because the Isoflex is a little waxier. You know, it holds in there a little bit better. I have no idea. Anyway, stick your seal cover on there, and then your seal cover will push that seal in nice and square and seat it completely in the housing. You just got to make sure you don't have a whole bunch of grease and stuff in the groove that the seal sits in. And I can't remember, I think these ones are like a 97 inch-pound torque on these. If you want to torque them, I don't think that you got to worry too much about that. These ones are easy to get at while the engine's in the sled, so it's easy to check them once in a while if you need to. Alright, that's that. PTO side will stay off. Now I'm going to put the stator back on, and it's had a little bit of glue in here that I picked out, right there. So got to kind of put a little bit more of the ultra black in there when we put that together. So now if you were going to Isoflex grease this, you would want to use a syringe like the one that I was using for injector oil, or something maybe even a little bit bigger than that, because the hole in the end of that syringe isn't very big, the one for oil. And then of course there's lots of videos on that if you look it up, but you take one bolt out in the bottom, one bolt in the top, push through one hole with the grease, and it'll come out the bottom. Guys are saying they're worried about blowing the inner seal. Now that won't happen if you got two bolts out, but even if you only had one bolt out, it's a good idea to vent anything in there out. I don't know how, you know, if I'd worry too much about the inner seal, but that's the way that it says to do it. So that's what you have. So with these, I'm just using a little bit of medium strength Loctite. It's recommended. Got a 6mm Allen, and I think these are 97 inch-pounds as well as spec on these, but you might want to double check that. It's the same size. Now, what I've done is just used a little bit of fluid film. This stuff repels water like crazy and really is anti-corrosion. Put a little bit of that on there. Cleaned all the rust off the flywheel. And I'm just going to put a coat on there. Spread it around. I'm going to clean a little bit more rust out of the inside before I put that on. Something that I had to take out of the old crankshaft is the wood drift.